was the problem with the bridge? We know the bridges, for example, now are not built to in the past were not built to resist collisions with ships, and I believe since the 1980s, bridge infrastructure has changed significantly since then. But we're going to talk about that with the experts. And then there's going to be questions about whether this was a foreign interference. So we're going to talk about all of these things. We're going to break it down, what happened, what went wrong, because there is a lot of complexities to the issue, and there's a lot of question marks people have both on social media as well as mainstream media. And so this is the reason why we thought it's important and imperative that we find out exactly what happened with the bridge, and we talk about it. Let me go to Colonel Jeff. Colonel Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. My first question is, and the question everybody's having is, if you want to give a brief overview of what happened, and then we'll break down, and we've got some questions for you.
Yeah, so hey, Suleiman, it's great to see you. Haven't had a chance to talk to you for a while, so it's good to see you back. So I woke up this morning in Austria, and I was watching the news, so I actually got to see it happen near live, or at least when it was reported. And I used to live in D.C. and Baltimore for 7 years, so I've been over this bridge numerous times, right? And it's a pretty amazing bridge. It is basically a bypass around Baltimore, so you can kind of cut over the bay and get from the north side to the south side. And from everything we've seen, it looks like there was a ship that lost power, regained power, lost power, regained power, and was kind of trying to steam itself out of the Baltimore harbor. It did make a mayday call, according to the governor who came on a couple hours ago or a couple minutes ago and spoke. So it made a mayday call. They were able to stop traffic over the bridge probably about 30 to 40 seconds because when you watch the video, the last truck going over is about 30 seconds before the hit. So the ship ran almost directly into one of the pylons, basically holding up the bridge. And as soon as it was hit, the center section of the bridge snapped, collapsed into the water, and then the remaining sections that were span sections all fell into the water. It's tragic. It looked as though from the video there was maybe 3 or 4 work vehicles. Yellow lights were flashing, so these were like road construction vehicles. As I understand from the governor, these vehicles were up there actually doing pothole repair because it was about 1 o'clock, 1 or 2 in the morning, local time. So that's about the time that you'd want to be on an interstate and doing pothole repair. So I'm sure that those are the bodies and the vehicles that the folks are looking for right now. I think that's probably a good start for us to move on to.
Yeah, and let's. I'm just getting it up. I had it here. Here it is. I just want to play the recording from the governor because actually, it's on 1 second. Just give me 2 seconds. Because he did come out after the collision and he did speak, and I think it's important that we get his perspective. He's quite young looking, and he's just a small little glimpse at what he said. Just give me 2 seconds. Just let me know if. Actually, I can't play it. 1 second. I'll get somebody else to play. I just realized. All right, okay, so just before we do, I will get somebody to play that for us. But yeah, there was a collision, unfortunately. We did have the Baltimore mayor come out and speak about what happened. And I have got a number of questions about this, and I think people do have questions. But go ahead, Colonel, do jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to share for our audience out there, right? So I put the video, it's run at 3 times speed so you can actually see it's up in the nest. I also put an overview with a circle around where the Baltimore Harbor is, where the bridge is circled, and for reference to see how big this bridge is. It's a 1.9 mile bridge. I just put for scale, a 1 kilometer marker up there as well up there. So people, if they want to go look to try and figure out what we're talking about as we discuss it, they can see it.
For sure. And I've got a number of questions, right? And maybe I should ask it now or in a bit. I think I'll ask in a bit because we'll go into some of the theories people have, maybe even some of the conspiracy theories. I think it's worth talking about, just to either speak about them, look at the veracity of them, or even debunk them. But it's important that we do talk about it because these are the questions that people have. But just on that, Colonel, I don't know if let me just ask you a couple of questions. So, Like, if you look at the United States, one of the questions people are going to have is, we've seen this collision with this bridge. We know what happened in East Palestine. There was Nick Sauter who basically who went there in terms of, again, the lack of in the issue with infrastructure. We know there's significant infrastructure issues in the United States. President Trump has talked about this on a number of occasions, as has many other people. I mean, is this again systemic of an issue in the United States where those in power have not looked at the infrastructure, have not improved it in the United States? It's a country which is essentially breaking down from inside, and yet a lot. And then obviously the other aspect to that is that people, and then a lot of money is being sent to foreign countries such as Ukraine and Israel. What's your thoughts on that, Colonel?
Yeah, so I think there's a hint of truth to all that, right? I mean, the weather was clear in a million, and the last time we had a major catastrophe in the United States where the weather was clear in a million was when an American airline slammed into the side of the World Trade Center, right? You're like, how does that happen, right? It's clear in a million. How do you not see the span? So the conspiracy theories, they've run wild. I haven't bought onto them. There are some questions that I think that we still need answered. I'm not saying that it's not some kind of terrorist activity or some conspiracy theory, but I also agree, right? We as the United States, and again, if you look at that Eastern Shoreboard, right, Baltimore, Annapolis, Washington, D.C., that whole section of the United States is packed with traffic all the time, all the way up to Boston and New York. So to think that, anytime you talk about wanting to do a major reconstruction effort, or you want to get in and redo a bridge, which one are you going to shut down at any given time and cause even more of a traffic pileup in all those other thoroughfares and arteries and gateways? It doesn't. First of all, it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars to do this. And then the other thing is that the traffic's going to have to be shut down for a very long time. Not to mention, how are you going to do this with not affecting harbor traffic in and out of Baltimore, in and out of Long Island, in and out of Boston Harbor? I mean, there's numerous problems and challenges, and sometimes, not saying it's the right decision, but I think sometimes the U.S. leaders just say no because it's the easier answer, right? It's a feel-good answer, right? Because there's no pain, there's no cost, there's no long-term turmoil. You can be reelected again because you haven't caused horrible traffic problems. But yeah, the easy answer was no, and maybe it shouldn't have been.
I think there's also to piggyback on Colonel's points is that obviously the loss of life is the most catastrophic thing, but we're in a state of inflation, right? This is going to put pressure on trucking and other ports around the country as Baltimore's taken offline, and who knows how long it's going to be before a new bridge gets built. There's not just permitting, but just having to figure out how much of the bridge we can still use, if any, what we can rebuild. It's a disaster for Baltimore, a city that's on the edge. So it's a huge tragedy. And just watching those videos of the people on the bridge is absolutely harrowing. And we do have John Conrad here, who is really knowledgeable. I'm wondering, John, what your thoughts are on this. I know you have a publication that publishes information on shipping, so wondering what you think.
Absolutely, it's the infrastructure is a major problem. This isn't the first bridge collision that we've had. The Casco Busan about 15 years ago, a container ship was coming out of Port of Oakland, hit the San Francisco Bay Bridge, and the concrete around the pylons and some of those larger bridges is much larger. So it didn't hit directly. It kind of sideswiped and tore into the oil tanks and caused an oil spill. But the bridge itself was not damaged. So is more protection needed? A lot of these bridges and waterways were built years ago, many years ago, and we haven't updated the safety regulations. We also we've taken this infrastructure bill, $1.2 trillion in infrastructure spending, and we've handed it to Secretary Pete. Well, there is more for electric buses than in that bill than all of the waterways, rivers, ports, everything maritime related in the entire country. So far, Secretary Pete has appropriated, I think it's about $700 million, which sounds like a lot. That's a huge investment compared to what we've received in the last 20 years, but it's still less than 1% of the entire infrastructure, and that has to be shared among the Mississippi River, all the waterways, all of the ports. And not only that, and that's the Maritime Administration, no one even thinks to ask them. No one thinks to bring them up in the news. They are so forgotten of an agency that no one even questions where they are falling apart and down. And then the Coast Guard is the operational control. They had Vessel Traffic Service is, manning the radars and manning the watch stations to help the pilot and help coordinate that response. Well, the Coast Guard has gone from just a few missions 20, 30 years ago to now they have 18 missions. They're managing drugs, migrant crisis, helping with the FBI. All of this has taken them away from their core mission of managing maritime. Their budget has been slashed. They just had to lay up 10 Coast Guard cutters. Well, before the cutters went, they got rid of ship inspectors. So the last time this ship was inspected was way back in September in New York, and I'm willing to bet that was a rather cursory inspection. And there isn't much ability to push back. The tugboats were released in this case early. That happens normally. I'm told that the tugboat captain asked in this case to continue through the bridge, and he was told no. He's going to be released. The pilots, there were 2 pilots on board, ship captains like myself, but they are experts in that harbor. They can request those tugs for longer, but if they put too much safety, if they request too many tugs, if they put too many regulations or push the Coast Guard into regulations, then the big companies, Maersk, MSC, are just going to say, well, this is too expensive. We're going to go to Savannah, or we're going to go to New York instead. So there are all these hidden incentives, and there's no leadership. Secretary Pete, he was delayed on the Ohio train collision. And then we had the Boeing door blow off. He said very little about that. We have the Merchant Marine is under direct fire. They're the target of the Houthis, the U.S. Merchant Marine. Secretary Pete is in charge of the Merchant Marine with this MARAD. He is the lead cabinet secretary, and he hasn't made one video press conference. So it's the worst combat conditions since World War II, and he hasn't even spoken about it. And then so in this case, without Secretary Pete's leadership, with the Coast Guard is also under this sexual harassment fouled anchor scandal, they're not very willing to get up and talk. Who's going to take control and tie together the Army Corps of Engineers, which does the dredging and the bridges, with the Maritime Administration, which handles the $1.2 trillion in infrastructure and asks for more money, with the Coast Guard, who does the safety? There's no leadership. It's fallen apart at the top, and everyone's to fend for themselves. And most of these agencies are too underfunded or to really care. And some of them, like the Maritime Administration, most of those guys are still working from home from COVID. They're not getting boots on the ground, and they're so forgotten about. FAA has 40 to 45,000 people. The Maritime Administration, which does all the ports and rivers for the entire country, only has 800 people, and half of them work at the Merchant Marine Academy. So even if they wanted to go to the office and really check in and really get a hold of this, there are only 300 people. It's a tiny organization.
Appreciate that. And guys, we are going to go live with President Biden's press conference in about 10 minutes, where he is going to speak about the incident in terms of the vessel, the Dali, clashing into the Baltimore bridge. And so we will speak about that. Just in the meantime, I'm just going to pass the mic over to Khaleesi, who's going to be playing the comments of the mayor. Let's see what the mayor of Baltimore had to say early on today.
Our Mayor Brandon Scott. Thank you, Chief. Everyone, this is a unthinkable tragedy. Our Mayor Brandon Scott.
Oh, you can't hear it very well, can you?
Yeah, that's not great.
Okay, let me just find another clip of it. Sorry, give me 1 second.
Okay, while Khaleesi finds another clip, let me just speak to Trent. Trent, John just explained that we basically have an issue where they're laying off people. There are issues with the infrastructure. It seems like there's issues with the just from a financial perspective of being able to maintain the workforce just at a minimal level. And so when you have that situation, and then again we spoke about it, where this money is going abroad to Ukraine and Israel, and so when you've again, is this again, has this been overlooked? Is this an issue from a infrastructure perspective where staff are being laid off, and then this is now having major issues and implications?
Short form, yes, it's a problem. It has been a long-term overlooked problem. When you tagged me to try and show up for this space, I asked John Conrad and Huntsman to come up. Huntsman couldn't make it, but he sent me something that probably will answer most of your space's questions. If you let me read it a bit, is that okay with you?
So yeah, sure, as long as it's short, because we don't want it to drag on too long as well.
All right. All right. The Dolly was equipped with 3 main generators and 1 emergency generators. Normally, when you're leaving a port, you have 2 generators running in parallel and a third main generator, emergency generator, and backup. When the power went out, that is the number 1 and primary number 2, the Dolly should have immediately had number 3 and the emergency generator come up. That didn't happen. Only the emergency generator came up. And the fact that it took 30 seconds, which is what you all saw on the videos, meant that they went into blackout conditions. And when they came back, the emergency generator came on. And the emergency generator is not enough power to run everything. The thrusters and the hydraulic ram gears for the steering didn't have enough power. So the ship automatically went into full reverse. Well, it only had 1 propeller, and when the ship went into full reverse, it automatically pulled right because of the torque of the propeller and went straight into the bridge. There's a lot of other things going on, but the bottom line is the shipping company could have had tugs with the Dolly all the way into port, but chose not to. That's normal. But it is cheap, and the moment that the power went out, the Dolly was doomed to hit the bridge. So what we're looking at is some sort of maritime casualty, reasons unknown. And as a result, the bridge went down. The question going forward is, how long is it going to take to fix this, and who's going to pay? And since we're dealing with an international conglomerate, and lots of maritime insurance companies, there's right now a game of hot potato going on in the federal circuit courts as to who's going to be the judge to deal with this. Because we're dealing with lots and lots of insurance companies, multi-nation conglomerates, and veritable swarms of lawyers. You're looking at a 10 to 15-year legal process before the payout for replacing the bridge actually shows up. And in the meantime, we've got the emergency situation of dealing with the immediate aftermath. That is, finding all the live and dead bodies associated with the downing of the bridge, the getting the Dolly loose from the wreckage, and then the cleanup of the wreckage, and then the reality of the fact that a month from now, pretty much everyone who's working in the port of Baltimore is going to be laid off because that bridge cuts off everything going into and out of the port. So the economic effect is going to be devastating to Baltimore. And the knock-on effects from having to redirect all of the maritime traffic that went into Baltimore, since it was the primary port where cars from Europe were imported into the United States. Most of Mercedes cars go through that port. So if we're talking tens of thousands of vehicles, and averaging $50,000 each, you're looking at fees and port handling costs for moving those cars into and out of that port that is not going to be generating tax revenue and fees for the Port of Baltimore in the local area, that too is going to be another economic impact. There's also the fact that everything that went across that bridge in terms of semi-trucks has got to find another way to go around. That is extra fuel costs that somebody is going to eat. And it's going to show up in inflationary price effects in the American economy. Now, the question is, and Mr. Conrad touched on it, you've got to have the Secretary of Transportation for the United States and for the state of Maryland get together and figure out a plan as to how to salvage the bridge. That is, take out all the down material so you can get the port open as soon as possible. Take all that wreckage somewhere, stack it up outside the urban area that is Baltimore, and put together a plan to build a new bridge. And if you're going to build a new bridge, you might as well make it tall enough so you can get the latest Super Panamax container vessels able to access the port of Baltimore, because the U.S. doesn't have any ports at this, as far as I know, that can take the very biggest of the container ships that are running around the world right now. So all of that is going to wind up as a massive reduction in the economy of the Baltimore area that will spread out in multiple states. You're going to have additional shipping costs that will show up in terms of fuel, and if you care for the environment, you're going to see additional carbon footprint from all the alternate transportation that's going to have to be arranged. And then you're going.
That.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Trent, continue. Just to let everybody know that President Biden will be going live very soon, and we will move to him as soon as he goes live. Go ahead, Trent, continue. Sorry.
All right. The thing that is going to happen is something like what the governors of California do when there's an earthquake that takes down interstate bridges. That is put together contracts for cleaning up the mess and then for building new infrastructure that have time-based profit built in. That is, if you get things done faster than a certain amount of time, you get additional money per day. So you get the nice capitalistic incentive of work as fast as possible to get the work done so we can get the infrastructure back up and the economy rolling. And that's going to take a whole lot of focus from the Biden administration and from the governor of the state of Maryland to get that done. Over to you.
I think it goes from an accident. There's an accident and a crisis, right? The accident happens is all these conflating, all these compounding issues. You have, not enough boat inspectors, poor infrastructure, maybe some errors on the boat itself. But it becomes a crisis because of our existing infrastructure. The United States is going through the largest, nearshoring industrialization in its history, and that's going to be more and more difficult. When we have ports like Baltimore offline, and even if they were to come online, they're not enough to, take us where we need to go as a country. And the United States has missed opportunity after opportunity to invest in its infrastructure. We had a historical opportunity to invest during COVID when everything was shut down. We had a historical opportunity to invest in infrastructure during the Biden administration, but they completely misallocated funds. And the United States relies on this creaking infrastructure that has never been built properly. And unfortunately, we all know it's going to take years and years to get a new bridge up and running in the city of Baltimore. Meanwhile, that city is, after it deindustrialized, has gone to shit. And I just don't. We need to see strong leadership from the White House on this because it's absolutely important. It's crucial that these blue collar jobs get protected and saved, and it's absolutely important that our infrastructure suits the direction of this nation, which should be the greatest industrial power in the world, and needs infrastructure to make that happen.
For real. Let me go to Khaleesi. Khaleesi, can you just play the clip for the mayor? Because this was the mayor of Baltimore early on speaking to the public after the incident and the collision of the vessel. Go ahead, Khaleesi.
Over to our Mayor Brandon Scott. Thank you, Chief. Everyone, this is a unthinkable tragedy. We have to first and foremost pray for all of those affected. Those families, pray for our first responders and thank them, all of them working together, city, state, local, to make sure that we are working through this tragedy. This is an ongoing active research that we're having right now. We're going to continue, as you heard from Chief Wallace, throughout. As long as we have to be doing that, we will do it. But we have to be thinking about the families and people impacted, folks who we have to try to find and save. This is what our focus should be on right now. We're going to continue to work in partnership with every part of government to do everything that we can to get us through the other side of this tragedy. And with that, I'll turn it over to County Executive Olszewski.
Thank you for that. That was the Mayor of Baltimore speaking earlier. I want to just welcome Nick back. Nick, thanks for joining us. I mean, you reported heavily on the East Palestine incident, and that was an issue that you were quite vocal about in terms of issues with infrastructure, issues with support, the fact that Biden et al. Had not even turned up for a significant period of time. What's your thoughts on this, A, in terms of infrastructure, and B, the fact that, I mean, they are responding a lot more quicker this time? What's your thoughts, Nick? And then, obviously, nice to have you as a host as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Solomon. One of the biggest issues that we see with the United States of America right now is the amount of money that we spend on everything but things that seem to benefit, Americans in their daily lives, like infrastructure and such. And you look at something, a piece of infrastructure such as the Key Bridge there in Baltimore. I mean, it's a huge, massive bridge. We're talking, a mile and a half long, that, and look at a map of it. There's nothing else nearby. There are no other bridges nearby. This is going to cause havoc in the city and in the region for, a good year at least. And this sort of thing was so preventable, just doing basic things like installing, they're called dolphins, around the piers that stop any runaway ships or anything from being able to run into those main piers and take out the bridge. It's such a simple thing to do, but we decided that we weren't going to do them for some reason. We saw the same thing happen down in, I believe, Tampa, Florida, back in the 80s, where a cargo ship slammed into a bridge pier and the entire span also collapsed into the water. And if you look at the new bridge that was built, there are guards all the way around, not even just the main piers, but secondary piers, to make sure this doesn't happen again. Why would we allow one of the largest, most significant ports in the United States, especially on the East Coast, to remain vulnerable like this, decades and decades after this problem happened down in Florida, is beyond me.
For real.
And we are going to try to get Thomas Massey on here, Congressman Thomas Massey, to discuss he proposed legislation related to protecting waterways and ports and such. And he's also an engineer, very talented engineer. And so we hope to have him on here in the next half hour or so.
Appreciate that, Nick. And good to have you on. Ryan, let me go to you. I heard you giving a kind of overview of what your thoughts were in terms of what happened. Love to hear what you got to say in terms of the Baltimore collision today.
Yeah, I lived through when the Bonner Bridge in North Carolina was hit by a barge in 1990. It knocked electricity out for Hatteras Island for months. It was like Lord of the Flies down there. We did not have power, did not have refrigeration, couldn't do anything with electricity. They had to bring generators down there. We could get 30 minutes of power per village a day. It was bad, and nothing was corrected since then. That was just one section of one bridge that connected us to the mainland. This is, there was a Mayday that went out, but it seems like it was only a minute before they hit the bridge, so there wasn't much time to do anything, to send out tuggers or anything. But a lot of my questions I have been answered. I wanted to know about the generators. That got answered. So, I came up to speak, but most of what I was going to say just got covered. So I'm just reiterating.
Appreciate that, Ryan. We know, and people have mentioned that there was interference. The electricity went out. I mean, some people are stating or believing or thinking that this could have possibly been foreign interference as well. What's your thoughts on that?
for what? I mean, to knock out a bridge, there are better targets if you're going to do electronic warfare. It seems like the boat was just it had problems with propulsion. They did say that to the authorities, and then the power went out around 1:27 in the morning, and a minute later they hit the bridge. And it's like the gentleman described, like it pulled right because of the rudder, and they hit it head on. There were no dolphins. There was nothing. They could have used the tugboats. It could have been a lot of things, a little bit more expensive, but a lot more safe. None of these things were done. Now, who would do electronic warfare to a cargo ship from China to run into a bridge in Maryland? Like, it does. There's no real motive. It's not like it's impossible to do, but I don't think so.
Yeah, and Colonel Jeff, I want to ask you. I want to follow up with you on that sort of thing. You know, if this was some sort of, and actually, I will say this in the comment section or in my DMs or something like that. If you are a maritime expert, if you've ever worked on a cargo ship, or you have any experience in working in ports and such, definitely put that in my DMs. We'd love to have you up here and talk about it. But Colonel Jeff, wouldn't it seem more likely that if this was some sort of attack, it would be done, maybe during the day, during rush hour, maybe something along those lines?
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not buying into the conspiracy theory, and there's a couple reasons, right? Baltimore is an important harbor. Please don't get me wrong, but you're taking away, as the gentleman said earlier, you're taking away luxury autos coming in, BMWs and Mercedes coming in from Europe. And to be fair, most of the harbors that we have today are really, really specialized. Baltimore Harbor is known for what's called roll-on, roll-off capability. It's called a ro-ro. And ships are now designed to either do ro-ro or do containerized or palletized or all these different things, right? So when we talk about, the ships from Baltimore that are on their way to Baltimore, they're ro-ro boats. They can't just go to any harbor. I think that's really important to talk about, right? Like you just can't take a ro-ro boat and then send it down to Norfolk, Virginia and say, hey, I want to roll off all these Mercedes. The reason I bring up Norfolk is, that's where the hub of our Navy is, right? That when you talk about Navy on the Eastern Seaboard, Norfolk, Virginia, that's where our carrier bases are. This is where our logistics and sustainment is. If you were going to try and take out, a bridge, that's what you take out. As a matter of fact, one of the bridges in Norfolk it's so important, it actually goes underwater, right? So the carriers can actually go in and out of port while you actually drive under the bay as opposed to over the bay. But there's still other viable targets out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, or Hampton Roads Tunnel or something. There's better targets.
Yeah, Hampton Roads Tunnel. That's what I couldn't think of the name. Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to say quickly, Nick, I am a ship captain, so I have been on.
Oh, perfect. Is he rugging out or is it me?
Yeah. I couldn't hear him for a bunch.
Johnny, there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
There we go. Now I can hear you. Okay, so, I don't know what, because you were a ship captain. That's awesome. That's perfect. I probably should have looked at that before I made the announcement. But anybody else, we can have a bunch of you on the panel. That'd be fucking fantastic. But, John, we're talking about people that are floating the idea, and I believe this ship was built in 2015, so it is fairly new in terms of a ship. Do newer ships have the capability of being, remotely controlled, let's say, where the rudders are electronic and these ships are connected to the internet, therefore can be hacked by foreign powers? Is that even a possibility?
Well, all of these ships are running navigation gear and equipment, electronic charts, radars, and such. It's usually Windows-based. Now, that is usually supposed to be air-gapped from the communication system, which is called GMDSS, Global Maritime Distress and Safety System. But is it always? And, there are rules, you can't swap USB drives and such, but it is possible. There's also a major concern. U.S. flagged ships that carry our military cargo are required to be repaired in the United States or pay a huge penalty, but China has been giving a major discount to those ships if they're repaired in China. And sometimes when they're repaired in China, the engine room teams are sent home. So it would be easy to install software or a remote, receive device that could shut off the engine room, or close a valve that stops the fuel. The question in this case, though, is that the best case to do it. It would also be fairly easy to pay off a seaman to run back into the the steering gear room and manually move the ship when it gets under the bridge so it's full steam. Why would you cause a blackout when you could, these seamen are paid very little. Get someone on board to throw the rudder while it goes under a bridge. And this is a major concern if we have a major war, right? To show how vulnerable this equipment is. But a more realistic approach is the systemic issues. And I want to put another one, all these new ESG regulations. So when a ship comes into port, it has to switch to cleaner diesel oil. And, the older ships, these steam ships, they could burn anything. You could drop paint in the bunker C tanks, and the old boiler steamships would happily burn them. But these newer diesels, and the environmental regulations go up, they are more sensitive to dumping. And a lot of the plastics industries has been dumping in the marine fuels for years. But now that the IMO UN organization has required low sulfur, cleaner fuels, any of this plastic or stuff that's dumped in the marine fuel has caused, over the last year, engine failures. There's also, when they go into port, they have to burn even cleaner diesel. So when they're leaving port, they switch from the cleaner diesel to the ocean diesel, which isn't as clean. And anytime you switch tanks while underway, it could cause a failure. Now, you're supposed to wait until the ship gets out into port before making the switch to the ocean diesel, but the crews are under enormous pressure from ship managers to do it earlier to save money. So that's one possible reason for this. We don't know for certain. We don't know until the reports start coming out. But was that switch made right before they were going under the bridge, and did that cause the failure? And in that case, it's the environmental regulations that precipitated this.
John, thank you for that. I brought up Caroline. Caroline, you are second in command of a U.S. flagged merchant vessel. And so I want to ask you on this, on a similar topic here. We did see the ship veer to the right as the power was coming in and out. What would cause it to all of a sudden start veering to the right? And are there no real effective measures in place that would? Actually, hang on. I'm getting a ping here. It looks like Biden. Are we going to that live?
Yeah, we are.
At about 1:30, a container ship struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which I've been over many, many times, commuting from the state of Delaware, either by train or by car. I've been in Baltimore Harbor many times. And the bridge collapsed, sending several people and vehicles into the water, into the river. And multiple U.S. Coast Guard units, which are stationed very nearby, thank God, were immediately deployed along with local emergency personnel. And the Coast Guard is leading the response to the port, where representatives from the Federal Highway Administration, the FBI, Department of Transportation, and the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as Maryland officials and Baltimore Police and Fire, are all working to get emergency response. Officials at the scene estimate 8 people were unaccounted for were unaccounted for. That number might change. 2 have been rescued, 1 without injury, 1 in critical condition. And the search and rescue operation is continuing for all those remaining as we speak. I spoke with Governor Moore this morning, as well as the Mayor of Baltimore, the county executive, both United States senators and the congressman. And my Secretary of Transportation is on the scene. I told them we're going to send all the federal resources they need as we respond to this emergency. I mean, all the federal resources. And we're going to rebuild that port together. That this was a terrible accident. I At this time, we have no other indication, no other reason to believe there's any intentional act here. Personnel on board the ship were able to alert the Maryland Department of Transportation that they had lost control of their vessel, as you all know and reported. As a result, local authorities were able to close the bridge to traffic before the bridge was struck, which undoubtedly saved lives. Our prayers are with everyone involved in this terrible accident and all the families, especially those waiting for the news of their loved one right now. I know every minute in that circumstance feels like a lifetime. You just don't know. It's just terrible. We're incredibly grateful to the brave rescuers who immediately rushed to the scene and to the people of Baltimore. We're with you. We're going to stay with you as long as it takes. And like the governor said, you're Maryland tough, you're Baltimore strong, and we're going to get through this together. And I promise we're not leaving. Here's what's happening now. The search and rescue operation is our top priority. Ship traffic in the Port of Baltimore has been suspended until further notice, and we'll need to clear that channel before the ship traffic can resume. The Army Corps of Engineers is on the spot and is going to help lead this effort to clear the channel. The Port of Baltimore is one of the nation's largest shipping hubs, and I've been there a number of times as a senator and as a vice president. It handles a record amount of cargo last year. It's also the top port in America for both imports and exports of automobiles and light trucks. Around 850,000 vehicles go through that port every single year, and we're going to get it up and running again as soon as possible. 15,000 jobs depend on that port, and we're going to protect those jobs and help those workers. The bridge is also critical for travel, not just for Baltimore, but for the Northeast Corridor. Over 30,000 vehicles cross the Francis Scott Key Bridge on a daily basis. It's virtually, it's one of the most important elements for the economy in the Northeast and the quality of life. My transportation secretary is there now. As I told Governor Moore, I've directed my team to move heaven and earth to reopen the port and rebuild the bridge as soon as humanly possible. And we're going to work hand in hand with the support of Maryland to support Maryland, whatever they ask for. We're going to work with our partners in Congress to make sure the state gets the support it needs. It's my intention that we'll pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge, and I expect the Congress to support my effort. It's going to take some time. The people of Baltimore can count on us, though, to stick with them at every step of the way until the port is reopened and the bridge is rebuilt. You know, we're not leaving until this job gets done. Not leaving until then. So I just want to say God bless everybody who got everyone harmed this morning and their families. And may God bless the first responders, many who are risking their lives. And I'm not going to take a lot of questions. There's remaining issues that are open, and we got to determine what's going to happen in terms of the rescue mission and the like. But
do you plan to go to Baltimore, sir? And if so, quickly?
I do, and as quickly as I can.
You said the federal government's also going to pay for the repairs. I'm just curious. This was a ship that appears to be at fault. Is there any reason to believe that the company behind the ship should be held responsible? And then also, you mentioned
pay for it to get the bridge rebuilt and opened.
What did you make of your decision not to attend this meeting this week?
Well, I want to give it plenty of time to talk about it.
You mentioned the port. Can I ask about the port?
He's walked out. That's it.
And of course, we got practically nothing out of that. But anyway, I think there was a good question that was asked. Why should U.S. taxpayers be on the hook for this bridge when a private ship ran into it? That's a question that I would want to know. And Tira, I'll ask you that. And there are plenty of other other points that I want to go to after that as well. But you know, you seem like to be the one to ask this question to. Tira, why do I have to pay for the bridge?
Well, my assumption here, and of course he didn't fully answer the question, is
you're right. He never does.
No. Nick, stop making this so political. It's a terrible tragedy. I just want to say that fortunately, it wasn't the initial.
So I think you'd asked me a question right before.
Wait,
I'm definitely going to get to you, Caroline. Don't worry.
Caroline,
this is just on the topic of what Biden was just saying.
Yeah, fortunately, originally I think it said 20 did. Right now, as far as we know, there are 6 missing, all from a company called Browner Builders, which was repairing potholes. So at least I think that is some good news in this terrible event. Number two, as to paying, what Biden said was the American government will pay for this, but I don't think he foreclosed the idea of getting reimbursed by the insurance companies. And I think, was it Colonel who was speaking, or maybe Trent, I forget who it was, but basically what's going to happen is there are an awful lot of insurance companies involved here. It's going to take 15 years or so. It's going to take a long time to sort this out from an insurance standpoint. So I don't think the U.S. wants to wait for that. I assume they will seek reimbursement for what the monies that they have expended. Right now, what we know is I think it's Grace Ocean owns the ship. Synergy was operating the ship. Maersk had chartered the ship. There are going to be a lot of people involved, and that's going to take a long time to wind its way through the courts. So that's what I assume is going to happen here. We will step up and pay for this because we don't want to wait 10 years for the money to come in, but then we will seek reimbursement from the relevant people. Thanks.
Yep, and as long as that happens, I find that to be totally fine. So thank you, Tara.
Hey Nick, can I ask a question to he already?
Well, we'll try to get him. We'll try to get him back.
Captain.
But Caroline would also probably be a good one to ask a question to too.
Perfect. Yeah. So, look, you asked the question about electronic warfare and could this be sabotage, and I would tell you that I don't think it's that easy. But if there's someone who's been in the shipping world for a very long time, I'd like them to talk through this insidious onset of technology and what it's actually done to harbor and port control authority and maneuver. Right. So originally, multiple years ago, we had LORAN, and then LORAN was replaced by GPS, and as new navigation and new technology came in, what did that do to, the Department of Transportation and control requirements? It allowed them to cut costs and cut measures and cut away tugboats and stuff like that. And I've seen it in the air industry. I was a navigator, right? I was unemployed. Once we got GPS, I became unemployed, and I had to go find another career in the Air Force. But I think it's the same thing in naval maritime traffic. And I was just wondering if someone could talk to that.
Caroline.
So over the years, like you said, there's been more developments in technology, and through that we've cut personnel. And I think something to note is that with the more, like you were saying, with more technology, they reduce the amount of people on ships, and also they're always all these operating companies. These are a lot of them are privately owned, so it's the management companies and the owners that kind of push for the budgets, and then they are kind of having a lot of control. They don't have control over regulations, but they have influence over regulations. So like you were saying, as far as letting tugboats go and things like that, tugboats are expensive. So companies, of course, would not want to hold the tugboats if they didn't think it was necessary. So like going under a bridge, it's not normal to have a tugboat just to go under a bridge for the sake of going under the bridge, because if everything is working on board the ship, then the ship should be able to maneuver under its own power. In this situation, there seem to be a lot of conspiracies and ideas going around. It will be difficult to know exactly what happened until the official investigations and reports come out. And that's kind of something that I wanted to talk about. I think you asked me before, Nick, why would a ship be veering to the right? Well, that could be any number of reasons. So it could be when they lost power, they might have lost power, they might have lost steering. Well, it looks like they did lose power, but from the videos, but they might have lost steering also. And the rudder could have been stuck over. Or they lost power and it was an attempt to slow the vessel down, because when you slow a vessel down, you want to turn it through the water to get it to reduce speed. And then who knows, they could have also, it's very hard to say without looking at without listening to the VDR, without doing the investigation exactly what happened there. I will tell you that there are a lot of mechanical issues that occur on ships. We do checks before we leave the port. We have inspections. We have all kinds of things, but mistakes or mechanical issues do happen, and that's what it looks like to me. Without seeing an official investigation, which could take up to a year, as we know, for the NTSB report to come out. So for the idea for it to be an attack, I think that's, a stretch, a big stretch. But I think it's most likely mechanical issues that have occurred here at a very important time.
What sort of measures are in place to stop a ship of this size, that is having mechanical issues or electronic failures or such. Why would it take so long to stop the ship, and what sort of measures would be in place? I mean, are there emergency anchors that drop down, and what's?
It's really hard to stop a 30,000-ton ship that has a power
Exactly.
outage.
Trent?
It's very hard with like he's saying, with the momentum to stop a ship that is that large, without propulsion, potentially without steering, and also without tugboats. Just dropping an anchor, the anchor will not fetch at 8 knots, no matter how much chain you let out to hold it. It's a very tragic accident. That's what this looks like to me. And also to kind of squash some of the other conspiracies that I just don't think are true as far as it being an attack. That ship, from what I read, it had not just one, but 2 American pilots on board. There's no way a Baltimore pilot would intentionally run a ship into a bridge. That is absolutely not something that would ever happen. I can just tell you that from my own personal experience, that no American pilot would ever intentionally do that. It's a terrible, terrible
Caroline, what about the other conspiracy? And it's not that it was done intentionally, but that there was outside interference which caused power outages.
Well, let's see. I heard somebody say the ship was built in 2015. That ship's about 9 years old now, which means about a year out from shipyard. And that's honestly when things start to fail. So I think that it's most likely that it was a mechanical failure. I think I heard John Conrad saying that it could be foul play. Yeah, I suppose it could be foul play, but more likely, I think it was just a mechanical issue. There's a lot of things that break on ships all the time. I deal with it all the time on my vessel. But usually we find them before we're in situations like this with routine inspections and checks and everything like that. It just seems like something was missed.
How often would you expect a catastrophic failure like this, though? I mean, one where not even necessarily running into a bridge, but losing all power, power flickering on and off to the point where the ship is just totally, it's, what do you want to call it? It's just, it goes wherever it wants to at that point. And I mean, there could have been other ships in the way and such. I mean, it doesn't seem like this would be a very common occurrence, no?
It does happen more than you would think, but typically, like I said, there's a lot of redundancy. You run more generators. You have extra precautions. Like at sea, if we're only running one generator and we're only running one system, then if something happens, then we have time to recover, and there's no one to there's nothing to hit out there. But if multiple things were to fail, it could be just, like I said, I am willing to bet that this was human error and something missed in inspecting the vessel. Like that's what I'm pretty sure is happening here.
Appreciate that, Caroline. Let me just go to Confluence. Confluence, we look at the information from Baltimore. You have 5.1% of bridges which are in poor condition compared to 8% nationally. Means Baltimore itself is doing a lot more better than the national average. But they have 25% of bridges that are more than 60 years old. And I believe that is the lifespan where you have problematic issues. And also, more newer bridges are being built to basically deal with the situation where a ship does collide with it, whereas the older bridges don't. When you have 25% of bridges that are more than 60 years old, it goes back to the same issue in terms of what we spoke about. It talks about that. It goes back to the same issue that Nick was reporting on in terms of East Palestine. Is there a major crisis in the United States in terms of infrastructure where American taxpayer money is no longer being used to support the infrastructure of the United States, and in essentially the money as well as being sent abroad to other countries? What's your thoughts, Confluence?
Well, 1,000%. It's like It's a quiet cancer, and it's especially invisible to Americans themselves. I'm an American, and I've been living abroad in a couple different locations the last 4 years. And the context, when you see global infrastructure, the innovation, the prioritization from an investment standpoint, and then you see what we're funding as Americans, much to the chagrin of now, ultimately both parties are starting to be fed up with the war machine. And it just goes to show that the United States under uniparty rule, with the war party being on the right or left, depending on which era we wish to look at in recent memory, we see that foreign war, expansionist policy, and crony capitalism has been a priority where infrastructure clearly has not been. So I think it's part of a bigger story here, and it'll be very interesting to see what quality standards of steel, what regulation rollbacks, what lack of upkeep comes to be shown and brought to light after the investigation comes forth.
Trent, I don't know if you can hear now. I know we were having a little bit of trouble hearing you before. But
I'm here now. I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So just a little bit of you say you're a retired U.S. DoD civil servant. What was your role? Let me just ask that first.
All right. My job was as a first quality inspector, quality auditor for systems, and later as a staff specialist. I had a very granular feel for a lot of the logistics that involve things going by road and by rail and occasionally by ship, since I worked at a truck plant and we sent stuff overseas. So I've got a feel for the transportation side, but mainly I dealt with the quality technical requirements of DoD contracts. So you get a feel for IATA and the various other regulations. That's international air transport and sea transport and DOT transportation regulations.
Okay, got it. Okay, so this is the reason that I asked that question, is because what sort of, if any, regulation do you think would be necessary to ensure something like this doesn't happen again, and maybe even a more catastrophic manner, such as, during rush hour, or, because you got to think, we're talking 35,000 plus vehicles per day using this bridge. If this would have happened during rush hour, you would have seen hundreds of casualties. I mean, no doubt. So what sort of...
You called that right, but the issue here is less regulation than politics. There's always money for new stuff. There's never money for fixing old stuff, because that's not what gets you elected. And it's as simple as that. The politics of infrastructure is new gets you stuff. The only way that infrastructure is maintained on a regular basis is if you have something like a toll authority, where you have a self-licking ice cream cone of interest that keeps building the roads bigger and wider, or redoing the bridges, because that's the money involved. How the bridge that replaces the current bridge that is now in the river is going to be a game of politics and a game of who gets the blame. That's going to be settled mainly in the courts, federal courts. And what needs to happen here in terms of regulations is the Corps of Engineers needs to put dolphins, that is basically concrete bumpers, in front of all the bridges that don't have them, since this is the second major bridge that has gone down, the first being in Tampa decades ago. And that, again, is a matter of politics.
When they rebuilt, sorry to interrupt, when they rebuilt that bridge in Tampa, didn't they build, they built it with additional abutments on it, is that correct?
Yes, they did.
To help the superstructure, or the structure there. Yeah,
but no one took the proper lesson from it. Gee, this might happen elsewhere. Let's put dolphins in front of bridges that are used by our ports. That is a political issue. That is, no one in Baltimore would get any payback. No one in the federal government would get any payback in terms of, campaign contributions, employment in major firms after their government careers, that sort of thing, to put major improvements in safety to transportation infrastructure. It's incentives, it's politics, it's all the dirty things. You get the government that you deserve, and if the public isn't hurt and there's no alternate political payoff for the people that are involved in transportation infrastructure, things are not going to get improved, and you will get disasters like this. Pay me now or pay me later, like the auto repair commercials you see all the time say. Over to you.
Yeah, and just for the audience, dolphins are essentially basically massive concrete bollards for ships so that they don't run into the main piers. And as I said earlier, for people that are just joining us, that I believe it was the Sunset Skyway Bridge down there in Tampa. I think that's the one that Sunshine Skyway. I'm surprised I even remembered that much about it. But that was the one that they're speaking about right now. And there are, a ship couldn't even get close to those piers at this point. I mean, they almost went overboard with it, which is perfectly okay with me. Now, there are some people down in the comment section in the bottom right-hand corner. I'm reading through them. Thank you for all your feedback. They are saying that, well, this bridge did, in fact, have dolphins. But if you look at the photos of these dolphins, they are way too far away to the point where they're almost completely worthless. And, they need to be a lot closer to the bridge, or else you're going to see something like this happen. Because, these aren't big devices, these dolphins. I mean, they're, 6 feet in diameter? So they're pretty easy to miss if you keep them far away from the bridge.
Understand that we're also dealing with ship inflation. Container ships today are hugely larger than anything that we've seen in the past. And we aren't even taking the biggest cargo ships coming into our ports right now. When you do transportation infrastructure, you only do things at the time when the bridge is designed. If you have major increases in the size of ships and the kinetic energy that comes with it, you have to relook at your transportation infrastructure in order to do it right. And the Tampa dolphins, the things that the bumpers in front of the piers, so if a ship hits it, it doesn't take down the bridge, need to be increased to a size commensurate to current maritime ship traffic. And if you don't do that because political reasons, that everyone understands but no one wants to talk about, then you get disasters like what we just had. The question now is, moving forward, what do we do? And I was hoping to hear from President Biden something addressing that, but that apparently is too much bandwidth for any president in a campaign year. Over to you.
Yeah, and so what was this infrastructure bill that we saw passed? I say it was supposed to be infrastructure, but I think it was more green energy than anything. The $1.something trillion infrastructure bill. Did we see any improvements for protecting bridges rather than just repaving bridges and stuff, or repainting
John Conrad
bridges?
mentioned earlier that $700 million in that bridge or in that infrastructure bill was for maritime things, but understand that includes everything. That is not only our main ocean ports, but the intercoastal waterways and all the interior riverways that have all the barge traffic that moves various, all the grains that come from the Midwest and go down to the port in New Orleans, all the materials that go up to various inland ports to feed their industries. We've got lots and lots of transportation infrastructure. Oh, by the way, there's this thing called the interstate highway system, which also gets lots and lots of money. The United States has been putting most of its infrastructure money into roads and bridges for roads, as opposed to the lower carbon footprint waterways and ports. If you want to reduce carbon footprint as a political/environmental goal, you should be putting more of your infrastructure money not into green energy, but into moving things by ships rather than trucks or trains because they use far less fuel per mile and ton of stuff moved. But that there's no political payoff for doing the smart thing as opposed to the hot new thing, which is, quote, green energy, unquote. Over to you.
Trent, speaking of reducing carbon footprints and things like that, on some ships they put these engine power limiters on to reduce CO2 emissions, but unfortunately, in situations like this, they kind of reduce the power of the engine to respond as well. So if a ship blacks out and then you regain engines and it blacks out again, you don't have the time to respond to maneuver the vessel. That will cause an additional delay in the response of the engine with a limiter. So I'm interested to see if this ship was outfitted with that as well.
The NTSB report that comes out a year from now is going to be interesting reading for a lot of people. Over to you.
Sure will be.
Oh yeah,
Which,
so
by the way,
Zag, I know you messaged me a little bit earlier, and you mentioned, and this was mentioned in the beginning of the space, but I thought we'd go ahead and rehash it a little bit because people are still asking about it down in the comments section. There was a Mayday put out. How early, or how long before the crash and the collapse was there a Mayday call put out, and did anybody respond to that? Were any moves made based on that Mayday call?
Yeah, the ship put out its first Mayday as soon as it lost power, and the harbor patrol put out a call to close the bridge. You could see some traffic racing across it just moments before the ship struck. It's reported that those vehicles got off okay, and that others were stopped before they were able to sort of enter the bridge complex, which probably saved a lot more lives, because you could imagine. So there are some protocols in place, but nothing to prevent the damage of the bridge, just a way to get people from crossing it. So I think this harbor has a lot of work to do, and it's one of the major carports in the United States. So we'll see how that plays out, too, because it's going to impact a lot of vehicle deliveries.
847,000 cars in 2023 entered the port of Baltimore from Europe.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the biggest carport on the East Coast. Not the biggest port, but the biggest carport. So they've got like a massive Carvana outside of Baltimore where all these cars go. So it's going to impact that community. And a lot of the people who live in the Annapolis area use that to get into other parts of town instead of taking the tunnel, which I imagine is going to become a nightmare for regular traffic moving forward for at least the time being.
It's also Mercedes' primary port to bring in vehicles into the United States. So if you have a Mercedes on order, it's going to take a while to show up now.
Well, damn. All right. Well,
yeah, they're saying, I can't confirm this, but images have come out from the crew log, and they're saying one captain was Indian, one captain was Ukrainian. So you can imagine how things are going to start swirling.
How did the ship have two captains?
That was my question.
It shows the two people in charge of piloting the boat.
Okay, so the pilots of the vessel are the Baltimore pilots, which are Americans. So I'm confused how they were piloting.
Yeah, well,
Shipping Spaces said the crew was all Indian.
Master of the ship.
So they had one master of a ship and probably a mate, is what you're thinking, on board on the bridge.
Yeah, so I'm trying to pull up this picture. Somebody sent it to me a little bit ago. Trying to pull that back up. Oh, here it is. Okay, so it says. All right, so it just shows me the screenshot that I got from somebody from BalticShipping.com. Said that and I haven't confirmed this, obviously. The master was a Ukrainian national. Last updated March 3rd of 2024. However, I have not confirmed that. I'm just giving context to what Zag said. But Max, I'll go to you. Welcome
Can
to the
I
stage.
ask Carolyn? Can I ask
Hi.
Carolyn really quickly if that is public information that's published? Who exactly is on the crew of the ship and what their nationalities are?
I think you guys are kind of. I feel like there's a lot of overthinking on this. Like the people piloting the ship, where they said like, "Hey, we're losing power. There's a possibility we'll hit the bridge." This wasn't like it was a surprise in the sense that like it was a surprise with advance warning. But like the people on the ship, like they were in communication with like the authorities. It was just the middle of the night, and that's like that's all that's happening.
I think there's also
here.
some...
Like the Ukrainian thing. I don't think there's been any confirmation, and also like it wouldn't matter at all. I think people are trying to turn this into. I don't even know. Like they're trying to do like the same kind of silliness that we see when people talk about like the USS Liberty or something. And I do kind of wonder like I haven't checked his timeline. Has Suleiman blamed this on the Jews yet?
Man, come on.
I mean, Max, you tried to throw in the USS Liberty when there is significant data to suggest that was done by Israel, so your blag's not going to work. But anyway, one second. I'm talking about the USS Liberty. In terms of this specific incident, I don't think there's no evidence to suggest it. Anyway, go ahead, Nick.
All right, yeah, we're just gonna steer clear of that pier, and let's.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we do. I mean, we have talked significantly about Trent. Let me go to you. I mean, we have talked significantly about why U.S. money should stay in the U.S. This is a prime example of that. Trent, in terms of coming back to what happened. Sorry, Trent, you got a hand up. Just go ahead, jump in.
All right. Since we have people rotating in and out of space, I'd like to bring people around again to the economic impact of the bridge being down for the Baltimore area and Maryland. The Port of Baltimore generates $3.3 billion in personal income. It supports 15,000 direct jobs and 140,000 jobs associated. That is, think warehousers, drayage firms, all the things that are necessary to support a port. The port generates over $395 million in taxes and $2.6 billion in income. In 2023, it moved 1.1 million TEU containers. That's a standard size for international container. The port's private and public terminals handled 847,158 autos and light trucks in 2023. So you are looking at this. There's a reason why the Port of Baltimore is the 10th largest port in the United States. And those were the hard numbers of the economic impact. What we are in right now is the rescue operations. And after that, we're going to be in recovery operations. And following that, we're going to have the Corps of Engineers giving contracts to clear the waterway as quickly as possible to get the Port of Maryland back running. But basically, we're looking at 155,000 jobs that are going to be laid off here in about a month and won't come back possibly for 6 months. So I'm just pointing out the economic impact here is going to be huge. I don't know if it's at 9/11 class. None of the numbers for all of this have come out yet. But we're looking at a major hit to the Baltimore and Washington area economy, and the environmental impact of moving to alternate ports and using different, longer supply chains to move all those automobiles and other containers of intermediate goods is going to be huge. I'm going to point out most of the container trade that you see is of intermediate goods. That is, think auto parts for AutoZone coming from China, or various box stores that get the cheap stuff from China, or that is, we're going to see issues probably with auto plants all across the eastern seaboard here in about a month because of the issues having to do with rebuilding supply chains to replace the Port of Baltimore for at least 6 months. Over to y'all.
Trent, real quick, a lot of people are asking this question. What sort of timeline are we looking at to get a look? America doesn't have a history of being the quickest people in the world to actually, build things within the past several decades. What are we looking at here in order to get this bridge back up and running?
You're going to have the governor of Maryland do something that the governors of California have been doing after earthquakes. That is going in and building a team whose only job is to get the infrastructure back as fast as possible. The way you do that is with contracts that are built around, we want it done in a certain time, and for every day less than that time, you get a bonus. So the companies that you hire to do this will do this quickly. I'm not a maritime salvage expert, but I can tell you, you're going to see very soon the Corps of Engineers hire companies, and you're going to have hordes of barges with cranes and cherry pickers cutting up pieces of the bridge and pulling it off with the crane, putting on barges and barging them somewhere else so that they can stack all the scrap metal for sale to various mini mill steel plants so they can make new steel. And that's got to happen starting immediately after the end of the investigation. As soon as the people doing the NTSB have done all their fact gathering, you're going to have hordes of people jump on that bridge debris, pull it off the freighter, and then clear the channels. And they're not going to be able to start that for several weeks, and it's going to take several months to clear it. And that's if you do the contracts right. And it's going to be a real political football that you're going to see the governor of Maryland, the Maryland Department of Transportation, the Federal Department of Transportation, and the Corps of Engineers, since they have the responsibility for clearing channels, to get it all done quickly. Everyone has got to do this quickly, and you're going to have lots of people walk through the environmental impact, because if you get lots of lawsuits because environmental regulation, we want this, that, the other thing, this is basically someone's got to throw a lot of money to make this happen quickly. And right now we've got a political campaign season, so the federal government is not doing anything quickly at all because of politics. So can it get done quickly? Yeah, we've seen governors in California put interstate bridges back really quickly by following that kind of contract instrument. But this involves federal agencies in an election year when we had just a government shutdown the other day. So can it get done quickly? Yes. Will the federal government get it done quickly? Heck if I know. I mean, I retired in 2020, so I don't have any feel right now for the current people. And I work in DOD, not Department of Transportation. So all I can tell you is there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape that has to be cut.
Yeah, there is.
There has to be someone in charge trying to make it happen quickly. And since we've got the Corps of Engineers involved, there's going to be a lot of process right there that is going to take basically a president sitting on the Corps of Engineers screaming, get it done quickly. And can President Biden do that? I hope so. We'll see. Over to you.
Thank you, Trent. Really appreciate your insight today. We are coming up on a hard stop here in just a few minutes, but I will go to Tira and give you some final thoughts. But I do want to let everybody know we are doing a space tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern time, with Stella Assange and Julian Assange's brother on the what came out today regarding his extradition to the United States and what sort of terms they are that the High Court over in the UK. Correct me if I'm saying that wrong, Silverman, but I don't know about your...
No, that's right. That's completely accurate. Well done, Nick.
Your court system over there, it makes less sense than ours does over here. So, but anyway.
We've got the greatest court system there is.
Oh, sure. But anyway, Yeah, I think this is the same court where there is a lawyer that's being sued for saying that women are the only ones that can menstruate. So, but anyway, yeah, we'll be live at 6 p.m. Eastern Time with Stella Assange and Julian Assange's brother. In the meantime, Tira, go ahead.
I just wanted to say something about the captain master, the situation about Ukrainians. The boat, and I think Caroline really spoke to this, the boat had 2 harbor pilots on it who were supposed to be responsible for getting ships in and out of ports. These are Americans. They were in charge of the maneuvering, so it really strikes me as a little almost it doesn't really matter if there was a Ukrainian on board because that's not who was running the ship at the time. And I am not suggesting that the harbor pilots had any role in this. What I'm saying is that it's just, let's look at the actual facts. 2 people on board, 2 pilots, and they were both American. That is actually, I think, by law required. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Tira. And we are about to wrap up, guys. Just once again, as Nick said, we have got a space at 6 p.m. Eastern. Do make sure you join in. And guys, our thoughts and prayers do go to those 6 people who are still missing, and we hope that they are found and they are taken to safety, because there has been a significant concerns that there may be a loss of life in this as well, which is a huge and major issue. Guys, appreciate you guys joining in. Appreciate you guys listening, and we shall definitely see you later on tonight. Thank you.